nous
different
mettre dans une relation
that
d'harmonie
can
avec
put
la
us in
nature.
a relationship of harmony with nature.
Oui, puis je crois que un des traits communs qu'on
Yes,
a,
and I think
Christian,
that
Bianca
one
et moi,
of
c'est
the
certainement
traits
cette
that we
notion
share
de
between the three of us
développement
is
de
this
la personne
idea
et
of
aussi du développement
personal
de la
development
conscience.
and a
Donc, c'est certain
development
que si
of
on travaille
consciousness.
ensemble, si on a des points
And
communs,
so if we work,
c'est parce
if
que,
we are working together,
oui,
if we
du
have
côté
shared
théorique, mais
points,
beaucoup plus
it's
aussi du côté
because
pratique.
obviously many of those are on
Donc,
the
c'est
theoretical
pas
aspect,
cette
but there are
notion d'avoir
also
toutes sortes
commonalities that we share
de
in our
connaissances
practices, our
sur comment une
practical
personne se développe, mais bien aussi de
efforts,
porter
our
une attention
understanding
particulière
not only
à
theoretical
comment
of how
moi je me
people
développe et
develop,
comment
but
à
also
partir de
paying
mon
attention
propre
to how
développement, soit
I'm developing,
personnel,
and based
soit
on
à
my
partir de
own
mon développement de
development, whether
conscience,
personal
comment
or my
ça peut
development of my consciousness,
transformer ma pratique
how
comme
that can
éco-pédagogue,
transform me.
ma
I can
pratique
transform my
aussi
practices as
comme
an
citoyen,
eco-pedagogue,
ma
my
pratique
practices
comme personne
as
aimante dans
a
une relation à
citizen,
deux, ma pratique quand
my
j'arrive
practices in
dans un
my
système, parce que
personal
souvent, les
relationships, my
systèmes
practices
peuvent
within
être
the systems. Often,
déresponsabilisants.
systems
En
can
d'autres
be
mots, c'est facile de dire
de-responsabilizing.
que
In other words, it
changeons
can
le
be very
système.
easy
OK,
to say,
oui,
well, let's
oui,
change the
certainement.
system.
Il n'y a personne
Yes,
qui peut être
absolutely, of course. I don't
contre
think
cette
anyone
notion-là.
can be
Mais comment est-ce
against
que moi, à
that
l'intérieur de ce
idea, but
système-là, quelle est
how
ma contribution, quelle est ma présence,
am
quel est
I
mon degré de
contributing
conscience, mon
to
degré
that
de
system? What's my
capacité
presence within it?
d'intervention
What's my
aussi, sachant que
understanding of
oui,
it?
sur
My
le plan
ability to intervene
individuel,
within
on a
it?
aussi
It's important
certaines
to
limites
understand that
et
on a
en même
personal
temps
level, we do
qu'on a aussi
face
certains pouvoirs.
limitations,
Donc,
and
c'est
we
cet
also have certain
équilibre-là, quand je
powers.
parle du voyage intérieur,
And so when
c'est
I
que
speak
depuis
about an
plusieurs années,
internal journey,
avec de
it's
nombreuses
because over
pratiques,
the
de
past
nombreuses
several years, with
interventions,
many different
consultations aussi
practices,
dans différents
intervention,
organismes, et en
consultations with
plus
different
de m'occuper
organizations,
de mon développement personnel.
while
Donc, c'est à partir de ces
taking consciousness of
notions-là
my own personal development
que mon voyage
and
intérieur
taking
a débuté
ownership of
et
these
aussi que mon voyage
experiences, my
intérieur se
internal
poursuit.
journey
Donc, vous
began
voyez
and
qu'il y a
is
quand même
now
un lien avec
continuing. And so we
l'auto-ethnographie
can see that
et
there is a link to the
ce besoin de
autoethnography
vouloir mettre cette
and
pratique
the
en mots
need to
ou ce qu'on
put
appelle de
words to
l'expliciter.
these practices or to make it explicit.
Et là, vous voyez à l'écran
And so you can see
une
on the
image qui m'a
screen
beaucoup
here
marqué en
an image
2019,
that really affected
qui a
me
été pour moi
in
une prise de conscience très
2019,
forte,
which is when I
qui
really
a
started
amené
to
justement
strongly take
mon intérêt pour aller vers la
become
recherche, vers
aware
les
of
changements
these
climatiques.
issues
Cette
and led
image
my
en
research
2019,
towards an interest in climate change.
qui est
This
vraiment
image in
à partir d'une campagne
2019
choc
was part of sort
pour
of a
la Journée de la
shock
Terre.
campaign for
J'ai bien
Earth Day.
compris l'intention des créateurs parce qu'elle
I
est efficace,
understood
n'est-ce
the
pas? Quand on
intentions
voit
of the
un enfant,
creators.
c'est
It's
bientôt l'Halloween. Quand
effective.
on voit un
We
enfant
see a child. It's soon going
déguisé
to be
en petit loup
Halloween.
au
We
centre d'une
see a
forêt
child
brûlée.
dressed up as
Pour les
a
adultes, on
young
regarde ça et on
wolf
se dit
and
aucune
in a
espèce
burnt
sera épargnée.
forest.
Et il y en a d'autres, on
And
voit
it
aussi un
says
enfant sur
no,
un
we're
glacier,
left to
une petite
understand
glace
that
qui flotte
no
dans le Grand Nord.
species is
Alors,
going to
on
be
se dit,
spared. There's
bon,
another image, similar one
et
with
là,
a
là,
child
qu'est-ce
on an
qu'on peut
ice
faire? En
floe
tout cas,
that's
moi, à
melting.
l'époque, je n'étais pas
And so
encore
I think
dans
it
la
leads us to
recherche
think, what can
au
we
niveau des
do? At
changements
that
climatiques.
time, I wasn't engaged in research
Ça m'a
around
interpellé parce que
climate
j'allais
change, and it
chercher mon fils
really
à l'école. Alors, cette
reached
image-là
me because I was on my way to
faisait
pick up my
partie
son at
de
school.
différents affiches posters
And this
sur
image was a
des
series
vitrines
of
d'une
posters
cafétéria
on
d'enfants à
the
l'école primaire.
windows
Mon fils aujourd'hui a 8
cafeteria
ans,
at a
ma
primary
fille
school.
6 ans.
My son today
Super
is
bonne
8 years
école.
old. My
Je me suis
daughter
posé
is
la
6. It's
question
a
comme
great
psychologue, je ne suis
school.
pas
And I
psychologue de
asked the
l'enfant,
question
mais ça
as a
m'a
psychologist. I'm
tellement
not a child
fait mal,
psychologist,
cette
but
image,
this
à
image
l'époque,
was so
parce que
painful for
ça m'a
me
amené
to
des
see at
émotions
the
mixtes
time
de genre,
because it
oh
brought
là là,
me
qu'est-ce
these
qui se
mixed
passe?
emotions
Parce que je
of,
savais
whoa,
déjà.
what's going
Mais
on?
quel genre de
Because I had
message
some
on veut
idea, but what
laisser à
type of
nos enfants?
message are we trying to
Pour des adultes,
transmit
je
to our
comprends.
children?
Pour
For
des enfants
adults,
de
I can
6 ans qui
understand,
peuvent
but for
voir cette
children,
image,
6 years
je
old
me
who
suis
see
commencé
this
à
image,
m'interroger sur
I started to ask
comment on
myself
peut, comme
questions
éducateur,
about how can
éco-pédagogue,
we as
continuer
educators, as eco-pedagogues,
d'aller vers une
continue to
pratique efficiente, être à
move
l'écoute.
toward an
Ça veut dire
effective
quoi
practice,
être
to
passeur
be
d'imaginaire? Quel
listening?
genre
What does it
d'imaginaire?
mean to
Comme
pass on
parent,
the imaginary?
comme
What type of
professeur,
imaginary
psychothérapeute, je
as
veux
parents, as a psychotherapist?
entretenir,
What
encourager, tout
imaginaries
ça.
do I
Alors,
want
dans le fond, c'est
to
l'élément déclencheur. Je voulais juste
entertain and
partager
pass
cette
on?
prise
So
de
I just wanted
conscience-là
to
dans ma
share
démarche.
this triggering element for me in my process.
Et on arrive au niveau de la pratique,
And now we'll
donc la
arrive at
recherche,
the
le
level
développement
of
de la personne, le
practice,
développement de la
research on
conscience,
personal
et aussi
development,
qu'est-ce que
consciousness.
ça veut dire ça dans
And
notre
what does all this
quotidien,
mean for our day-to-day
et
lives?
naturellement dans la vie de tous les jours.
Naturally, yeah, in
Donc,
how we
dans mon
live
quotidien
every
à
day.
moi, je me suis beaucoup
In
questionné
my
dans mon
day-to-day
introspection,
life, I've often
dans
asked
cette
myself
recherche de
through
pratique,
my
j'ai dit,
introspection,
comment insérer
practical
justement ces
research,
notions
how we
d'écologie
could
à
integrate these
l'intérieur
ecological ideas
des enseignements que je
within
partage
our
ici à l'Université
teaching,
Saint-Paul,
that the
et de la
teaching that I'm
façon
sharing here at
que c'est en train
University, at
d'évoluer,
St. Paul University.
c'est que j'ai tendance à inclure,
I
incorporer
found that I have a tendency
cette
to
notion
include and
d'écologie, de
incorporate the
nature.
idea of
Je préfère le
ecology
mot
and
nature
of
au mot
nature.
environnement, mais
I
ça, c'est une
prefer the word
préférence
nature over the word
personnelle.
environment. It's
Dans
a
la
personal
création
preference.
d'espace,
But including in the
dans la
creation
création
of
d'espace, justement,
spaces,
parce que c'est un des sujets que j'enseigne,
because this is one of the
pour apprendre
subjects
à
that I teach
écouter.
about,
Cette notion
but spaces
d'apprendre
that
à
allow us to learn
recevoir.
how to
C'est un
listen, to
peu
learn
ce que
how
Christiane nous
to
partageait
receive. It's, I
avec
think, a
son
little bit what
image. Donc, je
Christian was
reçois une
sharing with
image,
us through the
je
image
suis en
that
train
he shared.
d'écouter
Receive
des
an
vidéos.
image. I'm
Quelle est
in the
ma
process
capacité
of
de
watching
recevoir, puis
videos. What's my
ensuite
ability
la
to
capacité d'entrer en
receive, and
relation,
then my
d'entrer en communication
ability to
avec l'autre. Donc, cette notion de création
engage
d'espace,
with
ça fait quand
others. It's the
même
idea of
plusieurs années que je m'y
creating
intéresse.
space. It's something I've been
Un
been
espace
interested in for a
sécuritaire, oui,
number of
mais
years, to
j'appelle
create
aussi un
safe
espace de
spaces, yes,
courage. Un
but I
espace de
also like to
courage
talk
qui
about
permet
courageous
autant la
spaces
communication
that allow both for
bidirectionnelle, le dialogue,
bidirectional
en sachant quand
communication,
même
dialogue,
que, comme j'ai
and
noté
at the same
ici,
time,
sans l'écoute,
as we
la
know
voix
that
n'a aucune
if we're
valeur.
not
Mais la voix
listening,
a
if no
aussi une
one's
valeur.
listening, our
Donc,
voices have no value.
quelle est cette valeur-là?
So, but voices do
Et
have
toujours
value.
dans la même
What
veine
is
de
it? It's
création
always in the
d'espace,
same
oui, pour écouter,
vein
mais
as the
aussi pour
creation of
trouver sa
spaces,
voix.
yes, to
Parce que
listen,
je
but
me
also to
demandais, il y a
find
certains
our
cours que
voices.
j'enseignais, puis les
I found
étudiants
that in some of the courses that I
vivaient
was
des expériences
teaching,
extraordinaires,
students would
puis
have
je suis
extraordinary
devenu curieux par rapport à
experiences, and I
à ces
became very
expériences-là.
curious
Et
about
ce que
those
je me suis
experiences.
aperçu dans ma
What
réflexion,
I
c'est que
saw
finalement, en
through
créant un
my
espace,
reflections is that by
en
creating
favorisant l'écoute,
spaces that
ce
favor
qui
listening,
émerge,
that
c'est la
encourage
voix des
listening,
étudiants.
what came
Et
out
la
of it
mienne
was the
devient
voice of
secondaire,
students,
et je dirais
and
même
mine would become
tertiaire.
secondary and
C'est
sometimes
certain que
even
moi, dans mon
tertiary.
processus
And
d'écoute,
I'm
quand
sure
je
in my
suis
own process of
participant au dialogue
listening, when I'm
aussi, ma
participating
voix s'est
in
transformée
the
au cours des
dialogue,
années.
my
Puis ma
voice is
voix s'est tellement
also
transformée qu'à un
transformed
moment donné,
over
j'ai été
time
pratiquement une
to such a
dizaine d'années
degree that
sans
I
nécessairement
think I
l'exprimer
spent almost 10
parce que
years without
justement
really
j'étais en
expressing it
transformation.
because I
Et
was in
quand on
transformation.
est en transformation
And when
intérieure,
we are
il y a un
going through
changement de
internal
voix. Il y a une autre
transformations,
façon
there's a
d'aborder les
change in
questions,
our
une autre façon de
voice.
voir le monde.
There's
Et
a
on est un
different
peu
way
surpris
of seeing
initialement
the
à voir quelle est
world,
cette voix-là qui sort.
and we can be
Et ce que je
surprised
me suis
sometimes at the
aperçu dans
voice
les
that comes
cours,
out of it. And what
c'est
I
que les
found in
étudiants
my own
qui,
courses was
sur
that
certains sujets comme
students
la
who
nature,
on certain
l'écologie,
subjects such
la
as
prise de
nature,
conscience, etc.,
ecology,
n'avaient pas encore
taking
ou sont en train de
consciousness,
trouver une voix.
were
Je suis
still
pas
in
en
the
train de
process
dire
of
qu'ils trouvent la
finding
voix,
their voice. I'm
mais
not
qui
saying that
sont
they're
au moins
finding
en train de
the
trouver
voice, but they're
leur propre
finding
voix.
their
Donc ça,
own
c'est
voices.
deux ingrédients
So those are
qui,
two
à l'intérieur de ma
ingredients that
pratique, à
within
l'intérieur de
our
mon enseignement,
practices, through
à
my
l'intérieur de mon
teaching,
devenir
and through
éco-pédagogue,
my own becoming as an
sont essentiels.
eco-pedagogue are essential.
Alors, aussi dans l'enseignement,
In teaching, in listening to the students, like Marquis was saying earlier, I mentioned a phenomenon that I am aware of as a psychoeducator, eco-anxiety. And we did not want to, in this research process, work on something as specific as like eco-anxiety. We wanted to examine people in general. Eco-vision is a 3 studies project. The first one is ongoing. We are seeking to study people's perception of climate change. So through individual interviews and focus groups, we've already started. So about a dozen interviews have been conducted in French and English already. People from different Canadian provinces, and we are soon going to move towards discussion focus groups. Just a little clarification about this. I know this study is ongoing, and I am part of it. It is what brought me to work closely with you. The study is currently underway, and of course, you know, we don't want to advertise it, but we would like to, you know, make an invitation. If people are interested in participating to the study, please stay in touch with us. You can visit our website. You can also send us an email. What we've wanted to do was to create a space where we can pursue the dialogue. The second study will be launched in 2023. But we know that social media has a lot of impact. After one day on Instagram, 150 participants told us they wanted to be part of this study. There's still room for French speakers, and we're going to deal with it. If there are more English speakers who want to participate to this study as well, we'll find a way to make them welcome. But this confirms for me that the process is relevant. That's the first part of the study. There's also a second and a third part to the study. Yes, absolutely. We have different streams, different dimensions to this study, but stay tuned, as we say, because there's a lot that is coming our way. A few contributions quickly. Since getting the grant with Marquis, we have co-written an article about education and eco-pedagogy. We were trying to talk about the strengths in our approach and to address the issue of the imaginary, the value of the imaginary as a possible pathway for educators. Another article in the Frontiers review, we want to go towards holistic approaches that take into account spirituality. You know, we heard lots of people talk about the tyranny of positivity. We want to look at things from a systemic perspective, and that's the point around this article. There's another journal that's very known by psychiatrists and adepts of Jung, and here we talk about the fact that there's a difference to be made between our emotions and the emotions we experience in connection to the climate. Eco-anger is different from eco-anxiety. I won't get into the details right now, but those are topics that motivate us, that inhabit us, and I say us because I co-write those articles. I will continue with a word about our practice. It's an evolving practice. I appreciate what you say, Marquis. This is a way to develop ourselves as pedagogues, to work on our own selves, to have a good relationship with ourselves in order to help processes of development. And what I use now in my classes and with my different approaches is the development of compassion and the ethics of care. It is part of my educational approach. For example, we use mindfulness practices, self-reflection practices in the classes. And what I see is that students are feeling a lot of vitality, a lot of joy when they can speak about their internal world. And it was very interesting for me to discover this because it is a world that we do not explore enough. If we use, for example, knowledge, information as a way to open a dialogue with the internal world, we can develop very engaging, very interesting classes. The integration of theory with lived experience, emotions, and action for the students is very important because information is sometimes interrupted or broken by action and emotions. So it's important to integrate them, put them together. This brings me to generative dialogue, the capacity to listen, to find one's authentic voice, which is sometimes difficult. the way a person developed themselves to find their own voice, and the quest for meaning in transformative education. That's something that I'm very interested in. I also want to mention two other points. What I use currently in my classes is the emancipation of trauma-based beliefs. So the awareness raising process to emancipate ourselves from the prison of our beliefs that are based on traumatic experiences. The transpersonal awareness as well, the ability to develop ourselves and to have transcendence experiences. Excellent. I'm going to make a quick summary. Not a summary of what we just said, but a summary of the experience we lived together. On top of researching, doing research and having conversations, Bianca and myself have had specific dialogues, specific meetings. We call them trialogues about issues we are passionate about. Dialogues about our own process as eco-pedagogues, where I'm at now. An expression I like using is, what are the questions that question me? And what do those questions stir in me and in us? And what we would like to conclude this conversation with in order to open it again after. So to close our conversation, to open a broader conversation, we would like to tell you about what drives us right now, each of us. For the three of us, it's a process for me. I announced a shirt, Human Sciences Council. We have 3 studies, and it's something we do with empiric research. We see where we're going, but in my personal journey, there's a lot of things that are still emerging. One of them is an observation we've recently made about emotional intelligence. I was teaching about existentialists, and I was looking at different modes of existence, and I told myself, I'm interested in emotions. And there's a big reflection underway. There's a Finnish expert that thinks a lot about this topic, and this brought me to realize that I've been teaching about emotional intelligence for a long time in my classes, but we see that this is an interpersonal, intrapersonal experience. There are different models, different thinkers, and all of this is relevant, but at the same time, there's a reflection around modes of existence. If we think about eco, coming from ekos, from Greek language, the idea of the house, the home, how do we experience emotions connected to our common home, common house? And what is the meaning that will emerge from this within us? Sometimes with the notions we use in class, or even with clients, we can hide certain dimensions. So the idea here is to go towards holistic approaches and to start thinking about, what is anger? What is anger in the context of the climate crisis? What is anxiety in this context? Is it the soul being vigilant? Is anger closer to eco-lucidity? Is anger something that mobilizes us because it's the common good that is being stolen from us? So those are reflections that I currently have. I appreciate this idea, the soul being vigilant, with very strong emotions, anger, anxiety. I think that it's an important question. And what drives me personally with this dialogue that we're having together is the integration of critical and systemic thinking, skills that we need to understand what's going on with climate change, to understand what we can do. And at the same time, I'm interested in the development of emotional and spiritual intelligence. And as you've seen already, all three of us are interested in developing spiritual and emotional intelligence. For me, love, compassion is a spiritual practice. I try to develop it in my personal life, and I try to create spaces for the students so that they can develop love and compassion, so that we can think together about those two capacities. And in this sense, eco-pedagogy is connected with spiritual development. I think that if we want to integrate systemic and critical thinking properly with our capacity to feel and to love this house that we find ourselves in, we have better chances of finding solutions together and imagining possibilities together, possibilities that we may not be seeing right now, but it might be possible to get a glimpse of them. On my end, I keep working on this reflective practice, so this reflection about my own practice. And what drives me currently is the notion of identity construction. According to what I've been reading, there is a Greek philosophical approach that addresses identity as a way of being. I am this, I am that. I identify, this is a starting point of my identification. In ancient Chinese philosophy, the notion of identity is a notion of becoming. It's not a notion of being. It is a notion that is rooted in movement, in action. And what I find fascinating, because of course I reflect on those questions myself, what I tell myself is that when I look at the way we teach, the way we use social media with regards to ecology, we often have a tendency to use an approach of identity that is based on being. I am this way, I should be something else. We're in a state where something is lacking, something is missing, which is why we start looking for technologies to improve the human being, which is transhumanist concept that I find fascinating, that technology could or should contribute to improve the human being, as if humans needed to be improved. So this notion of movement, this notion of a pilgrim, of walking, of becoming an eco-pedagogue, of becoming someone, I find it more interesting and a lot more motivating for the days, the month, and the years that we will live together in connection with those great issues. So we've told you about, who we are, where we're coming from, what we do together, what drives us, what motivates us, and now we are interested. Of course, I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoints. We would like to interact with you and hear about what drives you in your becoming an eco-pedagogue. I think you have a question in the chat box. Yes, Patrick, I'm going to invite you to read the questions. This way it will help us focus on the question. So it's a purely methodological question for everything that you've mentioned about self-ethnography and focus groups and interviews. Do you see a rigorous autoethnographic journal in a pedagogical research? Yes, I didn't hear the end of the question with the sound. If you can please repeat the end of the question. that would be helpful. Do you see a rigorous auto-ethnography journal in educational research and pedagogy research? Yes. It's interesting to see that we often talk about rigorous processes when we do introspection, when we enter in ourselves. I think that as a process, it's always rigorous to take the time to use certain approaches, to self-reflect, to introspect, to engage in introspection. What I find interesting is that external rigor, if I may use the term this way, and maybe I'm jumping to the conclusion, but it's an observation that I've had for many years. The external rigor, the supposed external rigor that we use with scientific approaches have conducted the planet to the state it's in currently. So that's where it's brought us to where we are right now. And there are probably other forms of rigor, other ways of being rigorous. And I prefer the term love, compassion, gentleness. I think it would be interesting to think about how we can incorporate gentleness in the teaching of pedagogy. How can we incorporate more compassion? What space is there for love? What space is there for the person? So yes, rigor, but also yes to other dimensions. All dimensions which will allow us to reflect upon our own practices, on our own becoming. That's certainly something I prioritize, because we tend to believe sometimes in universities, and being a practitioner, I always have a foot. I'm a practitioner, and I always have one foot in the universities. In the university, we often think that practitioners are people who do not reflect, and when they reflect, when they think, they lack rigor. And I think that it is by working together, by exchanging, by engaging in dialogues, that we can be rigorous together. For the auto-ethnographic aspect, the rigor aspect, I cannot pronounce myself, but thank you, Marquis, for this perspective. How do we integrate it in empiric research? It's important to use a structure. We do it, we always record with the consent of the participant all the interviews. We take the time to go over the content with different software in Vivo and so on. We have a team that helps us validate the perception of the interviews we have with the participants. But we've conducted a study in the past where an observer was taking notes, focusing on this aspect, and there are other informations that are secondary, that are not only verbatim. That's also what I hear in the question about rigor. I would invite people who have questions to write them in the chat box. If there are no questions, you can continue the dialogue amongst the three of you. Are there any other questions? I don't see questions for the time being. You can continue contributing to the conversation. Yes, we still have a few minutes left. Is there anything else that drives you, that motivates you right now? Because we've presented a synthesis of many hours, many months of work. Is there anything else that you would like to share? Something else that drives you, that motivates you in your becoming? Many things drive me, inhabit me. How will we continue? As representatives of the project, the Eco-Vision, the study has been launched. I also feel very called by your project to put your heart into superior education. It's something that's very interesting. I'd like to mention that for the past 2 years, our conversations have been helping me to leave the beaten path as a researcher, as a clinician, because I hear about new notions, new ways of understanding the realities I'm interested in. So it's really helping me for the continuity of my activities, to see that through all the resistance that we can experience. As a very well-known psychologist in Canada, Mr. Drawford, our psychological resistance to change. He speaks of the dragons. I think that what we see increasingly is that something is happening to the world, to the planet, and that yes, we are resistant, but how will we surpass them? How will we go beyond them to find possibilities? So my path is to try to understand perceptions, emotions, to try to inquire about people's visions of the world. Do we still have catastrophic visions? Do we still think there are new ways, other ways of seeing things? I really like the notion of the ecology of presence, and it's thanks to this colloquium that I've discovered this notion yesterday during another workshop. It's very dynamic. It's in transformation. It's becoming. It is not set in time. Something else that comes to my mind about the symposium, because you talked about this as well, a difference between eco-anger and eco-anxiety. We know that Gina spoke of this with a lot of passion, and I truly appreciated the presentations on this topic, this notion of anger and emancipation. In terms of where you're at with eco-anger, eco-anxiety, this, I can't say anything about the research conclusions, but I have done some very interesting reading. We could send you the name for those of you who are interested in learning about those researchers. He is an eco-theologist. What I like about his approach is that he does not only have a disciplinary approach, he's interested in philosophers and so on. What we know about empirical research nowadays, and once again, it depends upon the interpretation we have, what is engaging is people who experience eco-anger, an eco-anger that mobilizes them. There's always a question of balance because people can fall into exhaustion, burnout with the anger. We have to be together in this awareness raising. Some people realize what's going on, but it paralyzes them. They are sensitive. Those people are often very sensitive. We see it amongst young people. Young people often report this distress, psychological distress, and it's been exacerbated by the pandemic. Of course, they need to be heard, listened to. So in terms of intervention, we have to make the difference between eco-paralysis and eco-anxious. I am eco-anxious. There's no shame in it. It's not something that prevents me from living. It makes me experience other emotions like anger. It is a holy anger. It is anger in the service of the common good. It is the being protesting against the robbery of the common good. I grew up in the countryside and I learned to love nature. I was involved in scouting activities and I learned how to love nature by being in nature. And it took me a while to awaken myself because I'm in the university world sector, but it's never too late to find a meaning in all of this. So I feel ready to accompany those who don't know how to awaken themselves. It's a gift for me, EcoVision. It's a drop of water in the ocean, of course, and I am right now discovering a multitude of individuals who are motivated by this. I don't feel alone. I feel well surrounded. If I may, we have a question from the chat box. There's one comment and one question. Would you like me to read them? Yes, certainly. So the comment is the following. It is from Melanie. I appreciate hearing your sources of inspiration to rethink our perception of the world. I conduct parallel work with cultural anthropological perspective. That's a comment. The question is the following. When we talk about eco-anxiety, it's often from the point of view of psychology, but do you not think that the harm is psychological, but the remedy cannot remain in the psychological sector, but must be found in the political arena? Absolutely. I am a psychologist by training, but very quickly, I've had the opportunity because at St. Paul, the chance I have is that I can work with colleagues from other disciplines. And my mentor was Raymond Lapré, who is very interested in anthropology. So congratulations for working in this domain in cultural anthropology. I think it's a very relevant discipline. It helps us understand emotions connected to climate. And I think that all disciplines have important contributions to make. We work in interdisciplinarity. It's not easy because we are limited by our own capacities. We cannot know everything, but let's keep working with this dialogue. Let's pursue it. It will bring us towards rich and fruitful encounters. It will bring us closer to emancipation. There are things we can do. Please get in touch with us. I would love to hear you about on your research, your reflection. It's fascinating. I'd like to add something to this question because just one word, you know, we have 1 minute left. We are living in a fragmented world, and disciplines, it's a great effort to bring disciplines together. We see that the question of emotions in psychology and mental health, they pertain to the psychological realm, and we say that they don't belong in the political sector, but they're interconnected, truly. Because what is happening in the world is what triggers emotion, is what has an impact on our mental states. I think that we must develop the capacity to be between the spaces and to bring the spaces and the disciplines together to help us understand our experiences. Unless there are other questions, Patrick, we are at the top of the hour. I thank you, Bianca, Patrick. So the interstitial epistemologies. I'm sorry, it's because you talk about the interstices, and it made me think of interstitial epistemologies. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, everyone. This brings us closer to the closure session. Thank you.